want to talk a little bit about Jesus and Mary, as you mentioned earlier, that you think that their teachings, well, Jesus specifically, was more so geared towards this sacred sexuality. So maybe you can go into that a little bit.
Well, there's a book called Was Jesus Married by Walter Phipps, I believe. I believe he's an Episcopal priest. It's not something you could probably easily find, but when I was living in Arizona, I found it in the University of Arizona Library. And it gives pretty straightforward factual information about why he wouldn't have been respected in his day if he didn't have a wife. Like, so that's that as a fact, right? But another book that actually was a paradigm shift for me that I came across in 1996 was a book called The Woman with the Alabaster Jar. And that kind of broke open my understanding of sexuality, my understanding of the Christian story. And just to summarize that very briefly, so the woman actually lives here in Washington State. She's retired now. But way back when, so she wrote the book in 1994, but even way before then, you might have heard the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which got a lot of press because of the Da Vinci Code. Well, that was a BBC special like long ago where a few people wrote that and they conjectured this whole idea that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. They did a BBC special and they wrote this book. Well, a long time ago, this woman that wrote The Woman with the Alabaster Jar, someone gave her that book. Now here's Margaret, who is a staunch Christian, just a conservative Christian, and someone gives her this book. And she's disgusted, but she also wants to read it because she's doing a Master Divinity degree and she wants to know what different views are out there. She reads the book, and when she's finished reading the book, she just wants to burn it. She thinks it's disgusting. She thinks that's not my Lord. That's not my Jesus Christ. That's wrong, right? But she started to have these dreams. She started to have like different things that happened in her life that wouldn't let her let go of that story. And then what she decided to do, she decided to do her master's thesis in her Master Divinity program to put together a definitive book to refute that book. Because at the time, that book was capturing the attention of mass audiences. So she wanted to put together a definitive work to say, that's bullshit. He was not married. He definitely wasn't married to Mary Magdalene, some prostitute. Bullshit, right? So she put together, she had all the time in the world. Her husband was in the military, so she was fully focused on this. And as she started to reach all these different places to construct her concrete evidence for this as much as you can, all of a sudden she started to realize, oh my God, I'm actually finding the opposite. I'm actually finding, oh wow, there's this suppressed fact, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And all of this stuff just started to bubble up in her research that actually pointed to that being true. And what happened, she tells in a kind of a memoir book that she has, later book, that her husband actually put her in a mental asylum for a period of time when she was working on this research. Because imagine a woman who loves the celibate Jesus Christ story, it's her whole life. Mm-hmm. And she's doing this in service of him to refute this story, and she's finding the opposite. And she's losing her mind. And what is so crushing to her is she had all her faith in the church, and she said, how could I have been lied to? She just couldn't believe it. So she spent the time in the mental asylum, and then she's like, this book, this is just too traumatic for me. I got to put this aside. I cannot work on this anymore. But things kept coming to her, like information, things kept showing up in her life. Mm-hmm. And she's like, okay, what do you want me to do? And what was happening is she couldn't get peace of mind anymore when she pushed the project away. She lost all of her peace of mind. The only time she had peace of mind was when she resumed work on it. And one day she looked at the Bible, because the Bible was like her source, right? And she said, okay, I'm just going to throw out this Bible, and God, this has torn me up inside. If you please give me peace of mind, like tell me what to do. Should I continue on with this or not? And she opened up the Bible and she just closed her eyes and she put her finger on something, and it said, restore my bride. And I've heard Margaret in person speak in seminars years ago. And it's hard to listen to her and not have some emotional impact, because she still has emotional impact. And how she interpreted those words was Jesus Christ saying, my bride has been misaligned. She's been said that there's this story which has been recanted by the church that she was a prostitute. They say they made it up, but so many people have believed it all along. It's kind of almost too late, right? But restore my bride, that she wasn't the prostitute, that she was my equal and even my teacher, right? And so this is when Margaret had the energy to finish her book called The Woman with the Alabaster Jar. And it's a scholarly book. And in there, she makes the case that there's a story in the Bible. The woman is unnamed, but there's this woman that washes Jesus's feet and anoints him with this expensive perfume. And the apostles say, why are you wasting that expensive perfume on her? It could fed the poor, all the money for that. And he said, let her alone. What this woman has done has prepared me for my burial. And what she has done, I think this is in Gospel of Mark, what she has done shall be preached in all of the Gospels, right? And so Margaret Starbird, in her book, she dives really deep into that passage in the Bible, really, really deep. And what she basically says is, that was a sexual ritual. That was a sexual ritual. Mary Magdalene was having sex with Jesus. And this whole thing about being born again, I'm an evangelical, I'm born again. Well, there is a rebirth of consciousness that happens, the reborn, right? So when I'm talking about psychedelics, they shut down your default mode network and you have an access to more. That's a rebirth, right? And so when Mary Magdalene had sex with Jesus in this very sacramental way, that's the word anointed means Christ in Greek language, right? Christ is translated as anointed. So when she anointed him, she brought him to this higher state. And when he died, and then, the resurrected, he's walking around in his light body kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's when he was able to transcend the physical realm and enter the quantum realm. And that's why, he was able to show up in his light body, his biophotons, right? The electromagnetic energy that's in our body. He was at a certain frequency where he could, in India, you have people that can walk through walls. That's because they have raised their frequency to a certain point where they're no longer just the material, physical. They can actually go back and forth, like Einstein said equals MC squared, that back and forth between physical and energy. And so what Margaret was saying in her book was that anointing, what made Christ, what made him not just Jesus, this dude, but this Christ, person that's able to, show up in his light body, was that she elevated his consciousness through sex. And it was akin to like a DMT rebirth. So she doesn't use DMT. She doesn't say it in the words I've said it, but that's what's, I've read that book